Hello and welcome everyone to our very special episode of Ask a STEM Sister. We are joined today by Dr. Wanida Lewis, and she is joining us today all the way from Accra, Ghana. Welcome, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, or merci beaucoup. Glad to be here.
Yes, and I know we spoke earlier about potentially some technical issues that we might have. So just if you see Dr. Lewis, step off video, that's why there's just some issues with power, but you should be able to hear her throughout the interview. So we're just going to jump in and get started. Dr. Lewis is an agriculture and gender consultant in Ghana. And I just want to start off by first defining for our audience what that is and what that means that you do each day.
Sure. So for me, what I do each day, so I actually work for a couple of different companies. One is based here in Ghana. The other one is actually based in the US. And so what I do is that I help companies to build out their operational framework or do their gender assessment to see where they can actually, if they're getting funding from, let's say, USAID, how they can be more aligned with their funding, what I'm supposed to be following, like, oh, we're doing women's economic empowerment, like putting it in your actual strategic framework. And then on the other side of it, from the ag side too, working with a waste company here where they are now become frameworks together. So looking at, putting together their quote unquote Bible and how do they, how can they scale up? What is it that they need? Where the resources? So kind of putting all their thoughts together because they specifically work with women in the informal sector here in Ghana, and putting that all together so that they actually have a blueprint for being able to scale up. So it just really depends. It's nothing too specific, and I've been doing it for the last, I guess officially the last couple months. And, of course, with consulting, you wait to see what happens, if you get a project or whatever. But what is really nice with one of the consultancies is that you actually get paid to write your proposal instead of writing the proposal and seeing if you get it, then you'll get paid, is actually the opposite. So that's what's nice to have, like, some flowing cash, because of course, as consultants, people always wonder, if you're a consultant, how can you make money? You just use your talents and you'd be surprised what comes about.
Awesome. It's very interesting to see that you've been able to, not only use those talents here, but overseas. And so I want to rewind a little bit and kind of go back to the beginning,
Sure.
earlier times in your journey. We see that you have your bachelor's in chemistry, you did a master's in analytical chemistry, and then went on to get your PhD in food science. So I want to hear a little bit about how you chose your undergraduate major, and how you landed up in chemistry, and how you chose your undergraduate institutions to begin with.
Sure. So for me, I went to school in Philadelphia. Um, I went to elementary school and then transferred to Jersey schools. And so when I went to school in Philly, I was actually at a predominantly black elementary school, middle school. And when I transferred into Jersey schools, I was, it's the first time of kind of feeling like the other. So I've always felt that sense of belonging, of course, as far as being in a room full of people that look like me, hence that I actually live in Ghana. That's not really the reason why. But anyway, so so what ended up happening was when I was going into high school, and they ask you, what do you want to be? At the time, Ben Carson was really well known for his, gifted hands and all the stuff instead of what he's known for now. And so um, I wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. That's what I thought I wanted to be. And I went to college. I specifically knew I wanted to go to an HBCU. It was just a matter of which one. So I actually ended up getting band scholarship because I played several instruments growing up. And I wanted to go to an HBCU, and I got one going to St. Augustine's College, now University in North Carolina. So I was happy about that. Sorry, something keeps biting me on my leg, and I don't know what it is. But anyway, that's why I keep looking down. But anyway,
Gotcha.
and so anyway, so yeah, so I was going to major in psychology, and my band director at that time was saying, "Oh, there's money for STEM majors. Why don't you major in chemistry?" And I was like, "Well, I like chemistry in high school. I guess that works." And so I did. I majored in chemistry. There was this. What came with the scholarship was an opportunity to do to do an internship at a neighboring institution. So I went to NC State, where I was paired with a black food scientist. His name was Dr. Boyd, and he was the only one in the department. And that's how I felt. That's how I actually was introduced to food science. I didn't even know anything about it, and I love food, and I love smelling my food and doing all crazy things. And so I did that for about 2.5 years. Also did a stint in industry as an intern, and then from there, I decided to go ahead and think like, hey, I can major in get my master's in chemistry, maybe food science, but not quite. So I ended up going to another HBCU as a part of another fellowship program, and did the bridge to doctorate over to NC State. And when it came to my doctoral degree, I thought maybe I would get my PhD in chemistry, but I actually had a class where you were allowed to write a grant on anything for that was related to thermodynamics, because I took an advanced thermal class, and I wanted to do work in wine. And so I was like, you know what, maybe I should go back to food science. So I called Dr. Boyd. He was on my master's committee, and he's like, yeah, do it. So that's basically what happened. So I ended up coming back, and I end up majoring in food science and kind of went from there. So talk about full circle.
Wow. It's incredible that you kind of knew, in the beginning that you wanted to be, at an HBCU, you wanted to, kind of be surrounded by folks who looked like you. How critical was that in your progression through your education to be surrounded by other Black students, Black mentors, and otherwise?
For me, it was very important because when I got to my master's program, you meet all types of people, and I realized how vital it was during my PhD because you deal with the systematic racism, and you don't always have that family dynamic. And so what I noticed was that I had the family dynamic coming from an HBCU, and it actually prepared me for my PhD, which is what I really valued. And so having that family dynamic, being able to find that support, it also, just dealing with the long lines of financial aid, all the other stuff that comes with it, you make some lifelong friends. And I would definitely say that, the women that I knew from my master's program, we all ended up getting our PhDs together. And so, we're still friends to this day.
Wow.
So to me, that was very vital. And then you're talking about influences, people who look like you. I mean, all the women that I encountered were women who looked like me. At St. Aug, I was one of 2 women, and the other person was a year ahead of me. We're still friends to this day, but I was the only chemistry major in my class. At Central, I actually got a chance to see women chemists, which was so vital, and they were women of color. Because when we think about chemistry or just science in general, you hear about maybe Marie Curie, you hear about George Washington Carver all the time, but you don't hear anything about like women of color. And then I was able to meet all these women who were scientists. So it was truly amazing that they were women who looked like me, who inspired me to be better, inspired me to be able to have it all, inspired me for me to be okay with being vulnerable. And I'm not would never say I didn't have any male influences as well, because I did. And they encouraged me to go after what I needed to have the quote unquote mentality of a mediocre person who's not going to work as hard. So that to me was very important, and it has helped me to be able to fail and get back up, and to keep going, because we have to.
That's right. I think that you said it kind of jokingly, hence why you're in Ghana. But I wanted to kind of tie those things together because now you are, you're in a Black country, you're in Africa, and, you have taken your talents and experiences overseas, particularly to West Africa. So I'm curious about some of the differences you've encountered being a Black woman scientist in the States, and then now in Ghana and in West Africa. What are some of the differences that you're encountering being there now?
For me, I mean, the thing is, of course, definitely, everybody thinks, oh, you're in this side of the world, everything is all gravy, and it's not. I mean, there's cultural differences. You have to understand the culture. I'm also from the East Coast, so I talk very fast, and sometimes, people don't understand what I'm saying because I talk really fast to them, or just even, using colloquialisms that they don't understand, and then you have to make sure and double check to make sure that people understand what you're saying. It's not due to competency. It's just you may explain something very different, and there's it's a definite culture shift. Being a woman here, being in the sciences, is also interesting because you're valued, but then again, you're also a woman, and there are, of course, men and women who they have their own culture. So for you to be able to speak out and say no, this is not correct, or schooling somebody on something that they're saying incorrectly, can also be looked down upon because they think you're trying to be a smartass, or you're just talking too much, and you're like, no, I'm actually correcting you. And there are a lot of people who don't like to be corrected, so that is definitely something different that I'm learning. um, here. But, of course, education is always valued. So it's always interesting when you're in these spaces, you meet someone, they're like, oh, this is such and such, he's a doctor. And then I'm like, well, I'm a doctor too. And then they're like, oh, okay. And it's like, oh, you, like, what were we expecting? I guess, like, you thought I was going to fall, like, head over heels, or like, oh my God, you're so worthy. And it's like, no, I can hold my own. So that is always an interesting, that's always interesting as well.
Wow, that is a really great point. I know that I've never been to Ghana, but a lot of this STEM Stars audience knows our family is from Sierra Leone, and so I know that age is a thing. And when people are talking to you who are just older or have had these titles, but maybe have had them longer, and of course the patriarchy of it all. So being able to come
Yes.
in a younger, you know, Black woman. So, to them, you have an accent. A young foreign, person with this title is just very interesting. So, very curious to
Hmm.
see um, how that was going. And then, I know you're working with women, particularly, or initiatives that are focused on women. Can you tell me a little bit about what drew you to agriculture policy, and particularly related to women?
I mean, I think for me it's because, I mean, having have worked in the food industry as a woman, of course you start to see that there's a gap, right? Like there's always a push to get younger people there, but it's usually younger men. And so for me, having experience working in the food industry, I remember how hard it was and still is to find other women that look like you. So for me, when I was working at the State Department, I worked in ag policy, I always wanted to work in policy and work on breaking down the communication of how policy affects our consumers. The biggest thing for me was that I saw was a gap. Of course, was talking about how women are included in the conversation. So one of the things I covered at State was women in agriculture, and the office I worked in at the time focused on biotech. And I'm like, but we always make sure there's men there, maybe women speakers, but there isn't anything specifically focused on women, especially in Africa when they're the ones in the markets, they're the ones doing the farming,
Yes.
doing all these things. So why we don't have anything around them? And so that's kind of where this whole thing was created, was to be able to have policy dialogues in parts of the continent, where we're connecting women from all across the mediums to talk about why biotech affects them, whether you're a farmer, a scientist who understands, or a policymaker. And we connected 250 to 300 women in Ethiopia, Ghana, as well as Togo, not Togo, South Africa, to talk about how biotech affects them. And the thing is too, also making sure that it's women who look like them and are from their region, because that was one thing I always made very clear, that I don't want someone coming in here and it is another person who doesn't look anything like them. It's another white male, and nobody wants to
Yep.
hear that, right? So keeping that in mind as well.
Awesome. I think it's one thing to, have your interests and your talents in STEM and to be interested in causes and policy overseas. And it's another thing to pick yourself up and actually move um, to to these other places. And so I commend you for trying something different and actually living where you are working, because I know for some groups that is not something that they think about actually doing, actually living there. So I want to ask you about any advice you would give to young women who are thinking about, they are looking at living in Africa or living in Asia or being able to take their talents and unique skills abroad. What would they need to start doing maybe early in undergrad or even in graduate school to prepare to take their STEM talents overseas?
Sure. First, I would say, if there's an opportunity to live there for an internship, if you want to do Peace Corps, you can do that. You can do that, I think, at any age, from undergrad to grad school. I would also encourage, if it's not an opportunity for you to go anywhere because of COVID, work for an organization that works on these issues in that country or that region, because that will also eventually open up for you traveling there. If you don't, if anything else, the what's going on, and then also pack your patience, because you're learning about a different culture, and that's anywhere in the world. So of course, outside of the U.S., and it really depends on where you are in the U.S. I mean, the South is different, but when you go to other parts of the world, there are, some of them are about building relationships. So instead of just saying, hey, hi, hi, Dr. Bandu, how are you? Great. So I have a question. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's like, hey, hi, Dr. Bandu, how are you? How's your mom? How's your dad? How's
Yep.
your da 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 da? And it's like a whole thing. And then you get into business, right? And so pack your patience and just be open. Also, too, if something doesn't feel good to you, it's okay to be able to say no. But don't be disrespectful. So that's one big thing. And then also to learn the language. I mean, I'm have this love hate relationship with French, and I'm still learning, of course. And so, you take it day by day. If you can at least learn one language, that also shows that you care a little bit too. It's interesting because, from a U.S. perspective, we're always talking about, oh, people need to come over here and learn English and do that, but we don't go anywhere else. I mean, if you go to Canada, they speak French, in some parts of
Mhm.
Canada. So it's like, just be respectful, and pack your patience and just be open to trying new things. And, there's an opportunity, go for it. Don't worry about what other people say. Sometimes we worry about money. Um, I mean, be smart about it, but also you have to take the risk.
I can really appreciate that. I think that you've had a dynamic career thus far, and we're all really excited to follow you and continue to see where your career continues to go. And so, a last question before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about what your future plans are and what you're looking forward to doing in 2021.
Sure. So for me right now, I am creating a startup called Crescendo Foods, because what I noticed here in Ghana, just in parts of the continent, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is that you have people who do, you have these small and medium enterprises that produce food in their home. But when it comes to wanting to expand, or even properly putting them on the retail market, it's expensive. No one wants to spend, I mean, it's the same thing in the US, right? No one wants to spend the capital getting a commercial kitchen. So the point behind Crescendo Foods is to help people scale up, hence the crescendo. And that's by providing a commercial kitchen space for them to be able to scale up their business. It's like an incubator where you, or I should say, co-working space where you pay for a certain amount of hours, use the space, and you leave. But you can also get business training there, understanding marketing, understanding how to export, and how, we offer that as well. So offering business training, but as well as food safety training, which there's nothing like that here. And also understanding the logistics of how to not even, have better efficiency and delivering your product locally, but also what does that look like outside of Ghana, but even outside of the continent. So
Wow,
stay
very
tuned.
exciting. We will stay tuned. We will keep up with you. We are going to follow you on Instagram, and you're on Twitter as well
Yes.
at Wanida
Yes.
L. Is that correct?
Yep. Wanida L. Yes.
And
On Twitter.
just looking forward to seeing what you do. Keep doing what you're doing over there. Thank you for hanging in there through your technical difficulties. If anybody watching it has been to sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa in particular, then you understand power and things like that. And so thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and just share a little bit more about how your experiences here in the States have lent to your career now in Ghana. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. Stay safe.
All right. Thanks, you too.
Bye bye.